As we cross these windy fields and head into the dark woods in the distance, we begin the search for an abandoned place that has now mostly vanished from the surface, existing almost wholly underground. This lost place has been the subject of some attention over the centuries, but the story has never been fully told. Today we explore the legends, dark halls, and lost histories of a dark entry, the abandoned dungeon cursed by a necromancer. Here in the countryside of Scotland, buried under a largely forgotten medieval castle, lies a one-of-a-kind dungeon chamber shrouded in mystery that has captured the imagination of writers and explorers for centuries. In an area once known in the language of its ancient Celtic inhabitants as the Kingdom of Godolphin or Eastred, meaning Dale, a barony called Yester was formed by a gift from King Malcolm IV of Scotland sometime before 1165. The new lord was a Norman immigrant named Hugh de Giffard, whose family had arrived with William the Conqueror and had moved to Scotland some years previously. During the reign of the next king, William the Lion, Hugh's son, Sir William, rose to importance, appearing in a hostage exchange and in royal charters for the founding of Jedburgh Abbey. He died in 1215 and was succeeded as lord by a Sir John, who died in 1225. John's son, Hugo de Giffard of Yester, became a guardian and regent of King Alexander III in his youth, through the Treaty of Roxburgh in 1255. In time, he would become known as the Wizard of Yester, a man famed for his arcane art and necromancy. While Henry III of England was in favor of Hugo's Council of Regents, the Bishop Gamelin of St. Andrews was not. He had been part of the original group that was dissolved, and in 1257 he visited the Pope in Rome, convincing him to excommunicate Hugo. Despite this, Hugo returned in the new council alongside Gamelin and expanded his power and lands, in time building a castle which included a strange and ornate dungeon that Walter Bauer wrote of in the 1400s. Hugo Giffard, Dominus de Zester, Moritur cujus castrum, vel saltum cavium et dungeonum arte demoniacula antiquae relationes fuerunt fabricatus. Loosely translated, this means Hugo Giffard of Yester, the owner of the town, dies in a dungeon, the work of the devil, dug with the aid of ancient arts and demons. This castle itself was large and sat on a steep-sided peninsula surrounded by two streams. A 50-foot across, 20-foot deep ditch was on the other side, forming a triangle. Inside was a huge tower with the dungeon below. Sir David Dalrymple wrote in the 1700s that in his castle there was a capacious cavern, formed by magical art and called in the country Bowhall. A stair of 24 steps led downwards to this apartment, which is a large and spacious hall with an arched roof, and though it hath stood for many centuries and been exposed to the external air for a period of 50 or 60 years, it is still as firm and entire as if it had only stood for a few years. From the floor of this hall, another stair of 36 steps leads down to a pit. It is now rendered inaccessible by the fall of the stairs. In 1263, Hugo the Wizard was to take a major role fighting against King Hakon of Norway, who had invaded Scotland. He is noted as fighting bravely in the inconclusive Battle of Largs, after which the Norse withdrew. While little is known of Hugo's life, strangely he is noted as dying twice. In 1267, according to Dalrymple and Walter Bauer, but also in 1280, according to other records that list his various actions after 1267. It's not clear how he became associated with demons and sorcery, but by the 1400s he became Hugo the Wizard, reported to be a necromancer and practitioner of dark arts, which he carried out in the dungeon, built through a pact with the devil and the raising of a magical army of goblins. While the story in actual historic record is startling, even stranger legends are attached to Hugo. One tells of his daughter Margaret's marriage, wherein Sir Hugo gave her and the groom a pear he picked with a warning that if the fruit was damaged, it would spell doom for the husband's family. If the pear was left whole, the family would instead prosper. The fruit, by then known as the Colstoun pear, from then on was kept in a silver box by the Brun family and remarkably well preserved. However, fatefully, in 1692, Sir George Brun married Lady Elizabeth Mackenzie. On their wedding night, Elizabeth dreamed of biting the pear, and later, when she was pregnant, she could not resist tasting it. Upon biting it, the pear immediately shriveled and turned brown and hard. George soon began to gamble and was forced to sell their home to his brother Robert. Robert, in turn, was to die, shortly afterwards in 1703 in a freak accident, when in a sudden rainstorm he crossed a flooded river, causing his carriage to tip and drown both himself and his 2 sons. George died destitute and alone in 1718 in Spain, the last of the male line. The pair is still held by the family today, bite mark and all. A final dark legend is associated with the wizard Hugo, where he was said to have laid a fatal curse on anyone disturbing the land or digging for treasure at the castle. Centuries later, in 1862, George Ha, the Earl of Gifford, a descendant of Hugo, was seriously injured by a falling tree while saving a workman at the castle. The Earl had been digging there with the crew in the dungeon's tunnel, trying to uncover a buried section. He died 2 months later from the injuries without a male heir after a rushed marriage on his deathbed. The castle stayed in use for centuries after Hugo the Wizard's death. However, by the late 1600s it was abandoned and had much of its stone removed for new local buildings. The dungeon remained in use by the Lords Falconer until 1737. Today, part of the castle still stands on its high outcropping over 2 streams. One great wall, a shard of tower, and the dark dungeon hall of Hugo the Wizard still remains abandoned and somehow untouched by the ages. As we head into the woods, we cross an old bridge. The amount of stone used to build this tall structure points at the stone being sourced possibly from the castle.
Oh, maybe that's the gate. Oh, there's a massive tree, too. Oh, cool.
To the side, more walls and what might have been a dovecote lies far in the distance.
Oh yeah, we should leave this way, probably. Although that just goes into another sheep field. Oh, there's a little tower, like a little block over there, too. Look at that tree.
The Shattered Tower. This is likely one of the later additions to the castle, which we'll talk about more later, built after Hugo's death. This drawing was done a few hundred years ago and shows how it has somehow remained much the same.
Goodbye time.
At the bottom is an intact barrel-vaulted basement with a fireplace. There are a number of odd little windows high up which we're going to get a better look at. This one does not lead anywhere, but has a channel going upwards as if it's a tiny fireplace.
Yeah, it'd just be really hard to get to it. Oh, there's more of a trail down here. I wonder where it goes.
Around the back side of the tower is the part facing the large ditch and stream. There's still an arrow slit in some of the tower buttressing.
Maybe just a walking trail.
For whatever reason, like in many abandoned places, there's a dead bird. This one might be a crow.
That's a skull. Mm-hmm.
Mixed into the undergrowth are the bases of some of the smaller towers and the 6-foot-thick outer walls. The dip and ditch ahead is actually the course of an old stairway leading to the dungeon under the huge tower that once stood here. It would have made for a very dramatic entrance. We're going to approach from this entrance first. To the side is a remarkably well-preserved 30-foot-tall, 6-foot-thick wall with a small gate. This was probably built in 1490 like the broken tower.
There's the goblin.
To the left, it's easy to see the steep drop to the water below that would have made this the only approach to the castle. We head down the original 800-year-old steps. The two closely spaced blocks would have been a doorway.
Interesting. Well, he did say go around, so I'm gonna go down these stairs anyway, but then it looks like there's a path over there, so maybe that's what he meant. Well, that's part of the fun, I guess.
Time has mostly buried one of the old entrances and its stairway. It's clear these rusty bars were added quite a while ago to prevent people falling into the dungeons below. Historians mention the long-ago collapse of the upper floor and stairs down. But there's another way in that we've heard of. The square hole would have fit a beam for blocking the doorway.
Oh, it's definitely not this way.
Thinkmaker heads along the side to try to find the hidden doorway that may have acted as a backup escape route. It was possibly a later addition, allowing exit on the cliffside above the moat. I moved to the top to shine a high-powered light inside from above. A ways down the hillside we find it. It's small, being half filled with hundreds of years of dirt and leaves. We reached the main chamber. It's very dark, and we left the attachment piece for the camera floodlight I had brought with us. It's plagued us since we set out on the trip, but we have an idea and will be lighting the chamber up from above shortly so you can see more of this amazing place. Above are some ornate carvings and a huge fireplace that would have sat on the second floor, likely a wood construction. It's easy to see why some would say in following centuries that magic was used to build this place, and in the darkness of the dungeon, it's easy to envision the scenes of Hugo the Wizard that the famous Sir Walter Scott wrote of in Marmion. A clerk would tell what years have flown since Alexander filled our throne. Third monarch of that warlike name, and eke the time when here he came to seek Sir Hugo, then our lord. A braver never drew a sword, a wiser never at the hour of midnight spoke the word of power. The same whom ancient records call the founder of the Goblin Hall. I would, Sir Knight, your longer stay gave you that cavern to survey. Of lofty roof and ample size, beneath the castle deep it lies. To hew the living rock profound, the floor to pave, the arch to round, that never toiled a mortal arm. It all was wrought by word and charm. And I have heard the grandsire say that the wild clamor and affray of those dread artisans of hell who labored under Hugo's spell sounded as loud as ocean's war among the caverns of Dunbar. The king Lord Giffords' castle sought, deep laboring with uncertain thought. Even then he mustered all his host to meet upon the western coast, for Norse and Danish galleys plied their oars within the Firth of Clyde. There floated Hako's banner trim, above Norwegian warriors grim, savage of heart and large of limb, threatening both continent and isle. Bute, Arran, Cunningham, and Kyle, Lord Gifford, deep beneath the ground, heard Alexander's bugle sound, and tarried not his garb to change, but in his wizard's habit strange, came forth a quaint and fearful sight. His mantle lined with foxskins white, his high and wrinkled forehead bore a pointy cap, such as of yore. Clerks say that Pharaoh's magi wore. His shoes were marked with cross and spell. Upon his breast a pentacle. His zone, a virgin parchment thin, or as some tell, a dead man's skin, bore many a planetary sign, combust and retrograde and trine. And in his hand he held prepared a naked sword without a guard. Dire dealings with the fiendish race had marked strange lines upon his face. Vigil fast had worn him grim. His eyesight dazzled, seamed, and dim, as one unused to upper day. Even his own menials with dismay beheld Sir Knight the grisly sire in his unwonted wild attire. Unwonted for tradition's run, he seldom thus beheld the sun. The two doors to the side would have provided access to both levels of the dungeon, presumably attached by a small stairway, now gone. A bit of the wall has caved in, yet 800 years of time has done little here. A small passage leads downwards into darkness. To the side is another beam hole for barring of the door that would have fit into the larger frame. Tiny steps lead down to rubble, but the passage is clear beyond this point. At the end, fallen stones and standing water. It seems that the attempt was made to fill the well to prevent an explorer from falling in. Records mention the well here through systems unknown linked to the stream. It was this section that George, Earl of Gifford, was trying to open back up when he was fatally injured in 1862, leading many to recall the old curse of Hugo upon the digging of the castle. We head back up to attempt to light up the interior. Scattered on the floor are circles and rows of burned-out candles. Key feature that sets this place apart from anywhere in the world is the one-of-a-kind arched Gothic ceiling. We're going to get as much light as we can on it to show you. An interesting alcove is to the side here. I'm in position above, and we use the flashlight's wide beam setting to light the dungeon as with the beams of the sun.
Cool.
It's truly something out of a story.
What you were doing was good, because then you can get a better view of everything. Can you go that way, isn't it? Shine it straight in. Yeah, it's pretty dark in here. But, alright. I'm coming out.
We head outside to explore the last areas. While the castle is famous for Sir Hugo the Wizard, it was also a place of conflict and home to lords who continued to be at the forefront of events in Scottish history long after his death. It's a story seldom told, being overshadowed by the legend of the Bohall. After Hugo's death, King Alexander III was noted as staying at the castle in 1278, where he wrote to King Edward I of England. Following Hugo's possible death in 1280, Alexander III died without heirs in 1286, and Edward I of England used the opening to seek overlordship of Scotland, with the castle entering the front line. After the following Battle of Falkirk in 1298, the English knight Adam de Wells was granted the castle during the English occupation. The castle was regained by Hugh Giffard's son, Sir John, in 1311 and mostly leveled to avoid its recapture. Sir John then fought in the vanguard at the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314. From him, John de Giffard II inherited in 1315. Sir John II married Euphemia Moreham, daughter of Sir Thomas Moreham, who died in the Tower of London after being betrayed as a Scottish patriot, and the Giffords of Yester inherited much wealth with the marriage. Robert the Bruce gave him even more lands, and he rebuilt the castle greater than before. John had a son, Hugh, in 1321, who would become the last Gifford of Yester. He was captured by the English while traveling back from France in 1337. Later, in 1346, he went south attacking England for King David, who was helping the French. Sir Hugh Giffard III died in 1365 after repairing the castle, and the Giffard line died off. His widow, Joanna, then married Nigel Cunningham, and he was considered Lord of Yester until dying in 1387. His oldest of 4 daughters, Joanna, then married Thomas Hay, and they became the new ruling family, the Hays of Yester. In 1402, John's son, William Hay of Yester, marched on Newcastle with the Scottish army. On their return with plunder, they were defeated by Harry Hotspur at Hombledon Hill. William Hay was captured during the battle, but was released in 1403. In 1478, Sir John Hay took over as lord and became very wealthy. King James III made him Lord Protector and First Lord Yester in 1488. John demolished Hugo the Wizard's old tower, leaving its dungeon, and built a new 4-story one in the 1490s, flanked by 2 smaller towers. It had a barrel-vaulted ceiling in the basement and a 30-foot-tall, 6-foot-thick wall surrounding it. In 1513, John, the second Lord Yester, and his Hay clansman, the Earl of Earl, who lived in Old Slains Castle, joined up to march south with King James IV to attack the north of England. Starting in 1544, the English tried to force Queen Mary to wed Prince Edward of England, first through bribes and then the burning of towns and castles. Known as the Rough Wooing, this led in 1547 to an attack on the castle, which was beaten back by John Hay, the 4th Lord, who was soon captured at the Battle of Pinkie Cleugh after falling from his horse. The castle was taken after a second attack in 1548 by the help of local Scots who supported the idea of Mary's marriage. Shortly after John was freed from the Tower of London, his son William recaptured the castle, but it was badly damaged. John Hay died in 1557, and his son William succeeded to the lordship. William Hay was a supporter of Mary Queen of Scots, and he entertained her at his castle in 1563. In 1567, Lord Darnley, Mary's husband, widely known as a violent drunk, died in an explosion after possibly being smothered. Suspicion fell on Mary's friend, Lord Bothwell, who was tried and acquitted. Shortly afterwards, he kidnapped and possibly raped her, after which they would become married. Scotland erupted in civil war, and Yester was there at Carberry Hill when she was defeated in battle. Lord Bothwell fled to Norway, where he was arrested and kept chained to a pillar at Dragsholm Castle for 10 years before dying. His mummified body was found in 1858, and the pillar, with a groove worn by his feet, can still be seen today. However, Yester fought on after Mary's abandonment, leading her forces in 1568 after she escaped captivity. They were again defeated, but even then he led her political party in captivity, asking Queen Elizabeth in letters to free her. In 1570 he was punished for these acts and lost his titles and lands. By then the old castle was still not fully fixed or the new one finished. In 1578 he was briefly declared a rebel for attacking men sent to take his lands. William decided then to leave the old castle and build a nearby 4-story tower house, which was completed in 1582 and named Yester House. For a while, the land was at peace, and a castle was less needed. That same year, he helped kidnap Mary's son, King James VI of Scotland. Yester was soon exiled in 1583 and fled to Holland. He died in 1586. Mary, Queen of Scots, was executed the next year in 1587, and his son William succeeded him as Lord of Yester. Soon young William had taken to riding around the countryside, dispensing harsh justice with 50 of his men, and he was tried in 1585 for the murder of a lord's servant but was not punished. Conflicts and legal issues continued until in 1587 the king visited William trying to settle his disputes, but William refused to sign the papers. He was imprisoned but escaped from Edinburgh Castle. In 1587, Yester was again imprisoned after the king summoned all the nobles to Edinburgh, with William having been the only one to refuse to pledge his support in a ceremony there. He spent more months in jail, was released again, and was appointed to the Privy Council, but died shortly after in 1590 at the age of just 30. His brother James became 7th Lord Yester, and in 1626 became the first Marquis of Tweeddale. Shortly after this, in 1646, the family became the Earls of Tweeddale, and the old family castle was officially listed as a ruin. John Ha, the second Earl, supported William of Orange in his rise to the throne and was made Lord Chancellor of Scotland in 1692, Earl of Gifford and Marquess of Tweeddale in 1694. His son, John Ha, 2nd Marquess of Tweeddale, inherited in 1697 and began to work on a new Yester house, which was still not done when he died in 1713. Upon his death, the building's work was still underway and continued until the 1730s. Redesigns occurred in the 1760s and 1780s, and the family lived there until 1967, when the house was sold upon the death of William Ha, the 11th Marquess of Tweeddale. Marjorie Yester was allowed to stay there until 1970, when she left, the last descendant of Hugh the Wizard, to live on the lands of Yester, ending 800 years of their rule. Now, 50 years after their passing from this place, Hugo the Wizard still casts his long shadow across the forests, beckoning visitors to discover the mystery of his lost hall. Join us next time as we travel further in Scotland to explore an ancient baronial mansion that was the site of a human sacrifice. A special thank you to Margaret Titch Small for the historic source materials used in this video. Thank you for watching. For more unique abandoned places and their lost stories, follow us today by subscribing here and hitting the bell icon. Until next time.